The old wooden porch creaked beneath his boots as he climbed the steps, the weight of war and memory etched into every tired step. His name was Elijah Brooks, sergeant, medic, soldier, survivor. 10 years in the U.S. Army. 3 tours in Afghanistan. 2 Purple Hearts. 1 shattered knee. Now, back home in a small southern town where his family had lived for 3 generations, the only sound greeting him was the soft rustle of an American flag waving gently on the front of his porch. He had placed that flag there himself the day he enlisted, a symbol of everything he believed he was fighting for: dignity, freedom, and a place to call home. But even as it waved, it seemed unaware of what was about to unfold beneath it. The neighborhood was still, eerily quiet for a Saturday afternoon. The sun hung low behind the trees, casting a soft gold across the front lawn Elijah had played on as a boy. The driveway held the car his brother had loaned him, still with temporary tags. His duffel bag sat in the back seat. He had only been in town for 36 hours, long enough to visit his mother's grave, long enough to unpack 1 drawer, long enough to think maybe, just maybe, peace had finally followed him home. But peace was a guest that rarely stayed long for men who looked like him. Elijah reached for the keys in his pocket when the flashing lights hit his face like a slap. Red and blue strobes cut through the trees, bouncing off windows, painting shadows on the walls of the house he grew up in. He turned slowly, hands instinctively up, muscles stiff with familiarity. He had been trained for situations like this, just never as the target. 2 police cruisers skidded to a halt at the curb, and doors flung open like a scene out of a war movie. But these weren't insurgents. These were local cops, suburban officers with itchy fingers and adrenaline-pumped egos. One had his gun drawn before a word was said. "Step away from the vehicle," barked the first officer, voice shaking more from ignorance than fear. Elijah didn't move. "Sir," he said, calmly measured, like he'd spoken to scared young men before. "This is my house. That's my car. I just got back from active duty." "Hands where I can see them," the second officer shouted. "You match the description of a suspect seen breaking into a vehicle in this neighborhood." Elijah's heart dropped. "I'm a veteran," he said again, his voice still calm, though the taste of humiliation and disbelief was rising in his throat. "I live here. You can check my ID." But no one asked for his ID. What they did instead was what they had been conditioned to do: assume the worst of a black man, assume that his skin was a weapon, that his posture was defiance, that his stillness was a threat. In one fluid motion, they charged 2 bodies against 1. Elijah went down hard onto the concrete walkway. His head struck the corner of the step. Blood mixed with the dust of his own front yard. 1 knee pressed into his spine. Another hand yanked his arm so violently it popped. "Stop resisting," they yelled. But Elijah wasn't resisting. He was remembering. The last time he heard that phrase was in Kandahar. Only then it came from an enemy. This time, it came from the people who were supposed to protect him. The neighbors watched from behind curtains, mouths covered, hearts heavy. Mrs. Henderson, who had baked him cookies as a boy, didn't even open her door. Mr. Clark, who had cheered when Elijah left for boot camp, quietly filmed from his porch but didn't speak. The silence of the neighborhood screamed louder than the police radios. By the time the handcuffs were locked around his wrists, Elijah could barely breathe, not from the pressure, but from the realization that his uniform meant nothing here, that his medals might as well have been chains, that after everything he gave, all America saw when they looked at him was a suspicious black man. As they dragged him to the cruiser, the flag on the porch flapped again in the breeze, not with pride, but with shame. And above that porch, the paint peeled from years of rain and wind and neglect, just like the promises made to men like Elijah. He didn't cry. Not then. Soldiers don't cry until it's over. But as the car door slammed shut behind him and his own house disappeared in the rearview mirror, Elijah closed his eyes and whispered the one thing that broke him more than anything he saw on the battlefield. "This ain't the country I fought for." The cell door clanged shut with a sound that echoed like betrayal. Cold steel, dull fluorescent light, concrete walls that smelled like sweat and regret. Elijah sat on the narrow bench inside the holding cell, one arm hanging limply at his side. The shoulder was likely dislocated, but he didn't ask for help. He'd endured worse. He'd been stitched without anesthesia under enemy fire. He'd bled into the dirt of foreign deserts, carrying soldiers on his back through mortar fire. But somehow, this small-town cage cut deeper than any battlefield. Not because of the pain, but because it was home. His clothes were still stained with the dust of his own front yard. His blood, his porch, his life. None of that mattered to the officers who locked him in. They didn't see a father, a veteran, a man who'd sacrificed everything. They only saw suspicion, and that was enough. Outside the bars, the jail buzzed with quiet cruelty. Phones rang unanswered. Paperwork shuffled. Laughter from two deputies who hadn't read the full report. Yeah, caught some guy breaking into a car. Said he was a soldier or some crap. One chuckled. They all say that. Elijah didn't speak. He just stared straight ahead, eyes heavy, body still, letting the pain from his arm drown out the rage in his heart. Hours passed. The other cellmates in the drunk tank stayed silent, except for one older man slouched in the corner, skin weathered like old leather. He looked at Elijah for a long time before finally speaking. "You military?" he asked, voice gravelly and low. Elijah nodded once. "Thought so," the man said. "You carry yourself like someone who's seen too much." Elijah looked up cautiously. "Did 2 tours in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq." The old man nodded slowly. "You came back thinking they'd see you different, didn't you?" That question hit Elijah like a punch to the ribs. He looked down at his lap and gave a bitter smile. "Thought I'd earned something. Thought the flag meant something." The man leaned back against the wall. "It doesn't cover us the way it covers them." And that was the truth of it. Elijah had worn that flag on his uniform like a badge of honor, like a shield. He believed in its promise that no matter your background, if you served, you were American. Fully, completely. But now, in the cold light of a jail cell, it felt like a lie stitched in red, white, and blue. Eventually, a young white officer approached the bars with a clipboard in hand, avoiding Elijah's gaze. "Brooks," he muttered, eyes scanning the paper. "Says here you match the description of a suspect. Dark hoodie, dark skin, near a car with temporary tags." Elijah raised his injured arm slightly and winced. "That description fits half the town." The officer shifted awkwardly. "We're still verifying your address and ID. You say you live there." Elijah said nothing. What was the point? They already decided what kind of man he was the moment they saw his face. The only difference between a war zone and home, he realized, was that over there, the enemy didn't pretend to be anything else. "Sit tight," the officer said, tapping the clipboard before walking off, as if Elijah had somewhere else to go. As midnight neared, Elijah closed his eyes and leaned against the wall. His thoughts drifted to the people who loved him, his sister Mia, who was probably panicking by now. She lived just 2 streets over. She had baked a peach cobbler to welcome him home, left it on his kitchen table like a symbol of comfort and sweetness. He wondered if it was still there, if the warm scent still lingered in the kitchen, the same kitchen where he learned to cook with his mother, the same house his father built with his own hands after coming back from Vietnam, and still getting called boy by white shopkeepers. The cycle never ended. Suddenly, a voice called his name, sharp or urgent. "Elijah Brooks." He looked up to see a woman in civilian clothes, black suit jacket, tight expression. "I'm with the VA. Your sister called. We're getting you out." But it wasn't relief that came over Elijah. It was exhaustion, because he knew this wasn't justice. This was damage control. Someone had pulled strings. The story would get buried. The officers would file vague reports. Mistaken identity. Reasonable suspicion. They would protect their own, while Elijah would have to explain to everyone again why being black in America means proving your innocence before you even speak. The VA rep unlocked the door, and Elijah stepped out slowly, cradling his arm. She looked at him with cautious sympathy. "We'll get you medical help. File a report." Elijah nodded, but his eyes were empty. Reports didn't erase bruises. They didn't undo the fear. They didn't stop a 10-year-old black boy from asking why his uncle was put in handcuffs outside his own house. As they walked out of the precinct, dawn was breaking. The sky blushed with a grayish gold, light spilling over cracked sidewalks and crooked streetlights. Elijah stood there for a moment, breathing in the early morning air. It should have smelled like a fresh start, but all he felt was tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep could fix. The kind that came from being seen as a threat in the very land you fought to defend. The morning air was thick with that heavy southern stillness, the kind that settled like a weight on your chest and made everything feel slower, older, worn out. Elijah stood at the edge of the cemetery, staring at the plot of earth that held the woman who taught him how to walk, how to pray, how to survive. The wind didn't blow. The birds didn't sing. It felt like even the sky was holding its breath. He hadn't planned to come back so soon. His arm was in a sling now, shoulder dislocated from the violent arrest. His ribs were bruised. The doctor at the VA told him to rest. But rest was impossible in a world where peace was a privilege and healing required justice he'd never been offered. So he stood there, in front of the cracked headstone that read Delilah Brooks, 1954 to 2011, and tried to find the words. "Mama," he said quietly, voice trembling with exhaustion. "I came home." The words caught in his throat. He crouched down slowly, one knee pressing into the damp earth, his body still aching. He placed a small folded flag beside the grave, one he had carried in his duffel bag from his last tour. It was supposed to be a gift, a symbol, proof that her son had made it, that he had done something honorable. But now it felt like a mockery. "They dragged me across our yard, Mama," he whispered, eyes glassy. "Right in front of your roses, right in front of the porch where you used to wave to the neighbors, like I was nothing." His voice cracked as he looked away, clenching his good hand into a fist. "All those years I spent out there," he continued, nodding toward some far-off horizon. "I thought I was doing something good, wearing that uniform, risking my life. For what? So 2 officers could tackle me in my own driveway, so the town could whisper while I bled on the sidewalk." He reached down and brushed away the leaves that had gathered around the grave. His hand lingered on the cold stone. They didn't even ask my name. Silence wrapped around him, heavy and suffocating, the kind of silence that made you feel small, made you realize how many men had stood in this same spot with similar stories, similar wounds, both visible and buried deep inside. A low rumble broke the silence. A car pulled up quietly along the gravel path, and Elijah didn't even need to turn around. He knew the sound of that engine. It was his sister, Mia. She stepped out, her face a reflection of grief, fury, and helplessness. She carried a brown paper bag in one hand and a thermos in the other. "I thought you might be here," she said softly, kneeling beside him. "Brought you some tea and a slice of the cobbler. You didn't eat last night." He took the bag with a faint smile, but didn't open it. Mia sat beside him on the grass, her hand brushing over the grave, just as he had. "You know, Mama used to say this place was the only part of town that treated people equal. Black, white, we all end up under the same dirt." Elijah shook his head, bitter laughter escaping his lips. "But we don't all live equal, do we?" Mia was quiet. "They'll probably sweep it under the rug," she said after a moment. "Say it was a mistake. Maybe offer a public apology if someone pushes hard enough. But they won't fire those officers. You know how this town works." "I don't want an apology," Elijah muttered. "I want the truth to mean something." Mia looked at her brother, her eyes full of the same fire their mother once had. "Then tell your story, Elijah. Don't let them bury it." He hesitated. The soldier in him, the one trained to endure, to be silent, to follow orders, wanted to stay quiet. But the man in him, the black man who had been tackled in front of his own flagpole, who had bled on the soil he thought he was protecting, knew silence was complicity. He looked back at the grave. "Mama always said, when you're in the right, don't whisper. Speak like thunder." They sat in silence for a few more minutes, the wind finally beginning to stir. Leaves rustled. A crow called from a nearby tree. It felt like the earth was listening. Elijah stood slowly, brushing the dirt from his pants. I'm gonna speak, Mia. Not just for me. For every brother who came home and wasn't welcomed. For every son who got judged before he opened his mouth. For every flag that was folded at a funeral while the country looked the other way. Mia nodded, proud and heartbroken. As they walked back toward the car, Elijah paused once more and looked over his shoulder. The grave was still, but somehow it felt like his mother had heard him. And maybe, just maybe, so had God. The video started with a shaky frame, someone fumbling to unlock their phone, zooming in through a curtain as the flashing lights lit up the neighborhood. The image wasn't high quality. The resolution blurred around the edges, but the story was unmistakably clear. A black man, standing calmly in front of his home, surrounded by police. No shouting, no aggression, no weapon, just stillness, dignity, confusion. And then it all happened at once. The tackle, the swing of a baton, the arm twisted violently behind his back, the blood on the sidewalk, the screams from nearby. The moment his head hit the concrete, the video caught it all. It was Mr. Clark who posted it. The same neighbor who used to call Elijah Champ when he was a boy, who hosted barbecues every summer with the stars and stripes flying high above his garage. Mr. Clark hadn't stepped outside when the arrest happened, but something inside him shifted as he watched the footage on his phone the next day. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was grief, or maybe, for the first time, he saw clearly what Elijah had always lived with. He uploaded the video with just one caption. This is what they did to a war hero. On his own lawn. In our town. The video caught fire like dry brush in July. Within hours, it was everywhere. Twitter, Facebook, TikTok. People resharing, reposting, commenting in disbelief. How is this still happening? He served this country, and this is how he's treated? What if he hadn't survived? Some comments were filled with rage, others with sorrow. And then came the calls for justice. Local reporters camped outside the police station. National news picked it up by nightfall. Photos of Elijah in uniform appeared beside screenshots of the arrest. His proud, stoic military portrait contrasted against the image of him bloodied on the pavement, face down, handcuffed. The hypocrisy was glaring. Back at his sister's house, Elijah sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the video play over and over on the living room television. He didn't speak. His eyes stayed locked on the screen, unmoving, unreadable. I didn't even know someone recorded it, he murmured finally. Mia nodded slowly. Maybe it's a blessing. Maybe people will finally believe you. He shook his head. They believed the video when George Floyd couldn't breathe. They believed the footage of Rodney King being beaten. What changed? Mia had no answer. The truth was, the footage didn't change the system. It just made it harder for the world to pretend. But pretending was America's favorite defense. The police department released a statement. A half-hearted one. We are aware of an incident involving Mr. Elijah Brooks. We are reviewing the actions of our officers and will conduct a thorough investigation. We value our veterans and all community members. No apology. No suspension. No accountability. But this time, the public wasn't letting go. Veterans organizations began speaking out. Black veteran forums, military bloggers, even active duty soldiers reposted the video. One tweet from a Marine Corps sergeant went viral. I've served with black soldiers like Elijah Brooks. We trust them with our lives overseas, but treat them like criminals at home. Enough is enough. Protests began quietly in front of City Hall. Local activists held signs that read, "A hero at war, a suspect at home. Protect black veterans." The flag didn't protect him. Why should he protect it? Outside of the city, the noise grew louder. News crews rolled in. A prominent civil rights lawyer reached out to offer pro bono representation. The story was becoming more than just Elijah's story. It was becoming the story. A mirror held up to America's face, showing a reflection it still refused to accept. Meanwhile, the police department scrambled. They claimed Elijah had fit a vague description. They claimed the situation escalated quickly. They released blurry photos of a supposed suspect in a hoodie 2 blocks away, but the timestamps didn't match. The alibi didn't hold. And now, with the video spreading like wildfire, there was no room to twist the truth. Because this time, the camera didn't lie. But Elijah wasn't interested in media, or marches, or lawsuits. He sat on the edge of the bed that night, looking at the sling on his shoulder, thinking about how a split second could have ended his life. How many others didn't get to watch the footage of their own brutality because they were buried 6 feet under before it aired? He thought about the years he spent dodging bullets, saving lives, the letters he wrote home to his mother, the names of the friends he lost in combat, black, brown, white, all brothers, all gone. And now home. The battle still wasn't over. Only here, the uniform didn't shield him. It branded him. A threat. A target. Mia walked into the room quietly and sat beside him. "They want you to speak at the rally tomorrow," she said gently. "The mayor's coming. So is the press." Elijah didn't respond right away. Then, what do I even say? Mia looked at him, her voice soft but firm. "Tell them the truth. The kind they can't ignore anymore." He turned to her, his face worn and heavy, but eyes slowly burning with something deeper than anger. Conviction. Maybe this pain wasn't the end of his story. Maybe it was the beginning of something more. The crowd had already started gathering by noon, their voices rising in chants that echoed off the marble of City Hall. Cardboard signs bobbed above heads like waves, handwritten truths scrawled in ink and rage. Veterans deserve respect, not handcuffs. Being black shouldn't be a death sentence. Elijah Brooks deserved better. The air was thick with July heat and something heavier, righteous fury. Mia stood near the podium, scanning the growing mass of supporters. Elderly black veterans with their service caps, white college students holding iPhones up high, mothers with children on their hips, allies of all colors. The whole town had shown up, but not for a parade. They were here because something had broken, and this time, silence would not mend it. Elijah hadn't wanted to come. He told her that morning, sitting at the kitchen table in the sling and bandages. "They didn't hear me when I wore the uniform. What makes you think they'll hear me now?" But Mia, eyes red from worry, said, "They don't have a choice anymore." Now, just past 1 p.m., Elijah stepped up to the microphone. His face was bruised, his posture stiff, but his presence unshakable. For a long moment, he said nothing, just stood there, looking out over the sea of people who had come to listen. The silence was deafening. Then he spoke. "My name is Elijah Brooks. I served this country for 10 years, 3 tours, 2 wars, and a promise." His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried weight like thunder on the horizon. I believed in that promise, that if I fought for this country, it would fight for me, that if I gave it my body, my blood, my years, it would give me respect, dignity, a home. He paused, the wind tugging gently at the microphone. But when I came back, I wasn't greeted with a salute. I wasn't given a medal. I was tackled in front of my own house, in front of the flag I fought to defend, by men who didn't see a soldier, just another black man who fit the description. The crowd was silent, every heartbeat straining to hear him. I didn't resist. I didn't yell. I followed their commands. But still, they threw me to the ground. Still, they beat me. And still, they never even asked my name. He glanced at the officers standing at the edges of the protest, their faces unreadable behind mirrored sunglasses. "This is what it means to be black in America," Elijah said, his voice trembling but steady. "You can serve. You can sacrifice. You can bleed for a nation that still sees you as a suspect first and a citizen second." He looked out across the crowd again. "But not anymore. I won't be silent. Not for their comfort. Not for their reports. Not for their lies." A murmur of agreement swept through the crowd. Some people were crying. Others clenched their fists, holding back fury. "Because this isn't just about me," Elijah continued. "It's about every black man who came home in a box. Every woman pulled over for a broken taillight and never made it home. Every child who learns to raise their hands before they learn how to write their name." His voice rose now, no longer shaking, but burning. If a soldier in uniform isn't safe, who is? If my medals can't protect me, what can? If a country loves my service but hates my skin, then what am I really fighting for? The wind shifted. Elijah gripped the podium tighter. So I'm asking you, not just to stand with me. I'm asking you to remember me. To remember this moment the next time someone says racism is in the past. The next time someone says just comply. The next time someone says we're exaggerating, because I have the scars to prove otherwise. He stepped back from the mic, his chest heaving slightly. The square was still for a heartbeat, and then it erupted. Applause. Shouts. A chant building from the front and rolling backward like thunder. Yell IJH. Yell IJH. Yell IJH. He didn't raise his arms. He didn't smile. He just stood there, head bowed slightly, letting the sound wash over him. Because this wasn't victory. This was survival. Later that night, a news anchor on national television would call it the most powerful veteran testimony since the Vietnam War protests. Civil rights organizations would call for a federal investigation. The police chief, cornered by mounting pressure, would announce that both officers involved had been placed on administrative leave, pending review. But Elijah didn't watch any of it. He was sitting back on his porch, alone, staring at the flag above him, the same one that flew on his uniform, the same one that watched him fall. He still believed in what that flag could mean, but not in what it had become.